Hello, Miss Lauren.
Hello.
Thank you for being with us today. Another one of our alumni ambassador interviews. Excited for this. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you studied abroad, what university you're representing today, just take the floor.
My name is Lauren 𝗟𝗧'𝗦. I'm a fourth-year student at the University of Texas at Austin, and I studied abroad with AIFS in Salzburg, Austria in the fall 2019 semester, which was the most wonderful experience I could have asked for. So happy to talk about it.
Yeah, you're a senior, did you
I'm a
say? Senior, okay. So big life changes coming up.
Very
cool. Nervous, excited, both? Any?
all of yes.
Yeah. So Salzburg, Austria, I'm thinking like Sound of Music, the hills are alive. Was there something that drew you to Salzburg? Did you know you want to study in Salzburg? How'd you kind of come upon that location as your choice?
So I chose Salzburg for a bunch of reasons. First and foremost, I am of German descent. I have a bunch of family outside of Munich, which is only about an hour and a half away from Salzburg, and I'm studying German, so I really wanted to experience Austrian and Bavarian culture firsthand, which that was a great way to do so. Second of all, I knew I wanted to be centrally located within Europe, so I could easily travel around, which Austria is quite literally perfect for. I could get pretty much anywhere by way of train or bus, which is a lot more affordable. And then lastly, I think I wanted to be something that was mountainous and very outdoorsy. Exploring outside and just being outside, hiking, those are some of my favorite things. So Austria as a whole is very environmentally friendly, very green, all that, so that's great. And also my brother studied abroad with AIFS in Salzburg as well, so that's how I found the program.
Your legacy, I want to ask this because I get this question from students often, like, well, what language do they speak in Austria? Because we think it's like Austrian, but they do speak German in Austria. Did you see a difference between like the textbook German that you're learning versus that of Austrian culture, and what were the nuances there?
Definitely. I personally at UT, the German department teaches more Northern German, so kind of like Berlin German, which is also very different from Bavaria. So like I mentioned, my family's in Munich when I first got there, and I was first learning the language when I went there, but I would start saying a few words and they were like, that's not what we say. And then in Salzburg, it's kind of similar to that as well. There's definitely an Austrian dialect. Because I hadn't been speaking the language very much before going there, it was kind of hard to pick up on the actual differences themselves, but even just in like greetings or by way of saying goodbye, like hello, goodbye, how are you? All of those are very different.
And now that you're back at IUT and you're studying German, has it been hard to pivot back to like that Northern German textbook? Yeah.
A little. Especially, I think the biggest difference is in the formality, whereas like, here at UT, it's a lot more formal. In Salzburg, it was way more casual, kind of just like, hey, how's it going? How are you? And you can use certain conjugations that I can't really use here. Other than that, it's still the same language.
It's one language, but it feels like you're learning too. And in terms of the outdoorsy activities, because Salzburg is a city, so I think probably a lot of people assume that there's not a lot of opportunity for the outdoorsy person. So can you tell us a little bit about what were those activities like that you found that you were able to participate in?
I personally went on a backpacking trip at one point in the semester in the Alps, about an hour and a half or so away from Salzburg. But there's also a mountain that's kind of like the landmark of Salzburg. It's called 𝗟𝗘𝗧'𝗦. A lot of people hike up that, as well as 𝗟𝗘𝗧. There's a whole bunch of mountains nestled right in like the foothills of the Alps, basically. There's definitely just a lot of around there. Skiing is, of course, huge in Austria. It's like one of the world, which I had never been skiing before I went, but I actually took a lesson for the first time near Innsbruck while I was there, which was incredible. Those are some like the outdoors things I guess that people do. Mountain biking tends to be a thing. There's a huge lake region as well, about 30 minutes away from Salzburg. It's very, very green in that sense.
Awesome. Yeah. So you have kind of the best of both worlds. You're in this little city, but you're huddled by mountains, outdoor activities. So it gives somebody access to both city life and country life, which is really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your housing? What are the housing options for a program in Salzburg? Which one did you opt into? And just tell us from morning to night, what is it like to live in Austrian housing?
So, okay, 3 options available for housing in Salzburg. There is the dorms, apartments, and homestays. I think the majority of people, myself, chose to stay in the dorms in Salzburg. More scary, so I think everyone kind of wanted to be with other people in the dorm. A few people, advanced German speakers, chose to stay in the homestays. So I was in an international student housing dorm, and then we were split into about probably 4 or 5 groups or so that were in dorm buildings throughout the city. So that was cool too, because go that like there's kind of pros and cons to each different dorm. Like personally, mine was closer to the grocery store and to classes, but further from like the city center. So it was more practical in that sense, which was nice. I could just walk to places, but then I could, just take the bus to other friends' dorms out in the city or further north in the city. So.
And those dorms are right on campus property or from?
Campus property, but they're very close. It was about 2 bus stops away.
Okay.
Was fine.
So you could walk to class if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's like a 15-minute walk, and it was always gorgeous outside, especially in the fall. Austria is kind of at the same latitude as like New England and Maine, so it has like, the worst autumn ever. So I usually walk.
Very cool. Did you get to? It was just all cold weather when you were there, or kind of?
When I first got there in early September, it was like sunny and 75 and gorgeous. But by October it was starting to get cold. Leaves are changing, which I'm from the East Coast, but I've been in Texas the last 4 years, so it was so interesting to have cold. And we even got a little bit of snow before we left in early December, so we kind of got a nice mix of good weather.
A little bit of everything. Very cool. If you can tell us a little bit more about university culture, what kind of classes did you take? Was there a class that was super challenging? Was there one that you would absolutely recommend any student to take?
So I took 4 classes while I was there, 12 credit hours. I was pretty, I think, average. My classes were art history, international conflict and resolution, contemporary Austrian culture, and a history of European socialism. I had a nice mix of things. I studied government, so like kind of relations classes is what I got mostly credit for. I think my 2 favorite were taught by the same professor, and it was the European socialism, contemporary Austrian culture class. And what I loved about those was that, I mean, aside from the professor, he was great too, but it was really interesting to put into context everything that I was seeing out on the streets and like in the country. Like, for example, we would see how Austria even came to be after the Austro-Hungarian Empire and through the World Wars and, the Cold War and all that, and learning about that context and how that shaped the structure of the government and education and like all of that. I mean, it's all around you as you're living there. So it was great to actually be able to understand it and learn about it from an Austrian point of view. So that was probably my favorite part. And we also learned a lot about pop culture and kind of compare similarities and differences to the US, which was really cool. Probably a more challenging class was art history. That's not generally something I've taken much of an interest in, but again, it was really great to be able to see it like there. We would, my teacher would take us on like walking excursions around the city and would be pointing out different types of architecture, like who painted this, or it was really cool to just see it so tangibly in front of you, all that history.
It's experiential learning, right? You're like not just sitting reading about it in a textbook being like, am I ever going to get to see this, historical site? You actually physically get to go there, so it's right. Pretty cool. Was there a historical site or like I guess you'd call it a field trip, a day excursion, what have you, that you did through your classes that's most memorable?
I know at one point we went to the Domplatz, which is like the cathedral, it's like right in the center of the old city. And we kind of did like just a walking tour of all of the churches in general. And that was probably one of my favorite ones. First of all, the class was just really fun. The teacher was quite a character. She was great. And so it was just like really fun to be walking like through the city and seeing the difference from a Franciscan church from like 1200 to then a Baroque style church in like the 1500s and the Renaissance kind of times, and then seeing like the cathedral of the church and how well they've been preserved. It's seeing like 200 years happen in between each one was just so cool because, here in the US you don't really get to see that because the whole country is 300 years old.
So you would say most of the time would you utilize Austria as more of a pedestrian city, or would you take part in the public transport more often than not?
Because of where my dorm was situated, I generally use the public transport to get to the center of the city and then would walk there. It's a very actually bike-friendly city. I personally didn't get a bike while I was there, but there were some people in my program that would like rent bikes for the semester. The road system was built based around that entirely, so it's very bike-friendly and not the most efficient for cars. But like I mentioned, Austria is very environmentally friendly, so their public transportation is great. AIFS gave us bus passes each month, so I would generally take that into the city and then would meander through the streets from there.
Did you experience any green initiatives? What are those initiatives? How do they differ from that of the US?
At any like bus stop or any place in public, all of the trash cans, they have like sections for trash, recycling, composting. They separate recycling between like white glass bottles as well as plastic. So it's very like mandated and structured, it seems. Whereas here it's kind of like, I think it's recyclable.
Does it have a 1 on the bottom? If not, trash. And water by the tap, water by bottle, what?
By the tap, the cleanest water. I learned something about this. I'm not entirely sure yet.
Yeah, it's okay.
The water would come straight like through the 𝗟𝗘𝗧'𝗦, through the mountain. And so water in that region in general, in like Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, is some of the cleanest like natural running water. It was very safe and very clean in general, which was, I guess, contributed to the environmentally friendly aspect too. And also similarly, like when I would go hiking in the Alps, there was never trash on the ground. The leave no trace principles are very like strictly followed there.
Are there punishments if you don't?
It kind of just seems like everyone generally has a deep respect for the nature around them.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your packing experience was like pre-departure? I know everyone always dreads this question. What was your practice to pack? What were things you wish you left at home? Things that you bought when you were there that maybe you didn't need to bring? All of that.
So I will preface it by saying I have always been packed to be as prepared for anything that you need to be. I get that from my mom. She's prepared for any situation. So when I was packing, I was like, oh, well, I'll need this for this day and this for this day. But I would definitely recommend, as much as possible, don't overpack. You're going to want to get gifts for people when you're there. Probably go shopping and collect souvenirs, knickknacks, and it can be really expensive to ship boxes back, or I ended up having to check another bag on my way back. So take it from me, you don't want to do that. My biggest advice would probably be like lay out everything that you think you'll want to bring and then take out like 10 things. Just try to pack the most like versatile layers that you can. The biggest help to pack lately will be packing like functional layers, especially during that season. It can be, 75 during the day and be down to 40 at night. To be able to like pack smartly for all of that, you have to be able to bring things that can be very versatile, that you can wear in lots of situations and layer, and bring something that's waterproof. Always bring a rain jacket and waterproof shoes that are comfortable to walk around.
Did your sense of style change when you were there? I'm sure we don't dress all that similar to the Austrians. Maybe we do.
I did buy some clothes while I was there, but I don't think my fashion sense necessarily changed too much. But I will say that I just became a lot more confident as a person in general when I was abroad. So I was a lot more willing to wear things I've always wanted to wear. I guess I'm more comfortable in being myself from being abroad. So I think that also influenced my fashion probably.
We will definitely circle back to the question of all the ways that you have changed, Lauren, because I'm sure there's numerous that we could discuss. Can you tell us a little bit about a day in the life, just from morning to night, and if you want to separate it between your weekday schedule versus your weekend schedule, just tell us a little bit about what we would experience a day in the life of Lauren in Austria.
I think it's very different depending on your class schedule and what you like to do and all. I had 2 classes every day in the mornings from Monday to Thursday, and luckily in Salzburg, I don't know if this is true for all AIFS programs, but we had no classes on Fridays, which was a really nice start to weekend trips.
That was a perk.
Generally on like Mondays and Tuesdays especially, I would go to my classes from 9 to 12 while a bunch of my classmates were still at school. I would usually take the bus to a coffee shop and start like working on whatever homework was due that week, or catch up on journaling from the weekend trip I just took. Some time to like catch up on whatever it was I needed to do, and do that for like probably, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours or so. Then whenever I either wanted a break or was done, I would take the bus probably a couple stops more north, and then I would just like walk my way back basically and take a different route most times, because those days it was usually after I had taken a weekend trip. I'm very social, but I'm very introverted at heart, so I wanted that to myself to like collect my thoughts and process everything that was happening, take it all in, So that was a great way for me to do that. I've always loved thrifting. There's a lot of those in the old city. So I would stop in and, talk to the owners. I would attempt to use my German. It was really bad at that time. The locals were always so kind and wanted to hear about my life in the U.S. and why I chose to be in Salzburg.
I'm sure they found it very endearing that you at least try to use the language. If you put it out there that you're making an effort and you're not just expecting them to be fluent in English, then they're usually kind and well received. Mm-hmm.
Or at least asking them if they speak English before just assuming that they do. Almost Salzburg, and especially in that region, will speak English, especially in the younger generations, but it's definitely it's a lot more polite ask in German, sprechen Sie English? Like, do you speak English? So that was kind of how I would spend my afternoons. And I would go back and cook my meals. I always cooked my own meals during the week to save money. It also was kind of cathartic. That would be probably Monday and Tuesday. Thursday, I was usually packing for the next weekend trip. And we would either leave Thursday night or really early Friday morning.
Who was your resident director for Salzburg?
Ingrid.
As somebody living in the dorms, how often would you interact with the resident directors? What kind of activities did they set up for you?
Well, first of all, I will preface this with the on-site staff for AIFS is truly remarkable. Ingrid was great. Also, the other people working in the office, great, Mikhail. They helped a lot, and they would come on any excursions with us, especially in the beginning, all the city tours. We went on a hiking trip in Bavaria. They came to Vienna with us, Innsbruck with us. They're so helpful, especially at one point my roommate needed to use the healthcare system, and that's not really something you think about until you need it. Mail with customs, it's kind of all these things you don't really think about until you need it. Then we're like, what do we do? Going to the on-site staff was great. We saw them in our school building every day. I got some good interactions with them. I would say probably with Marie and Mikhail, because they came on more excursions with us. I got to know them a little bit better, but Ingrid was incredible, and she made sure that everyone had everything they could ever possibly need or want. And then for excursions, I went to Vienna for 3 days, and that was a unique experience because a lot of the weekend trips I was doing were with smaller groups of people, whereas that one was with the whole class. So it was great to get outside of the classroom, but still be with everyone that I wasn't normally with every weekend, and be able to, bond and get to know more people through that. Plus, Vienna as a city is incredible because it's Austria's capital. It was the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There's just so much history. So I love that trip.
What are some things you did on the Vienna trip?
The great thing with AIFS, the way that it structures, the whole program, but also experience, is that it'll kind of structure some things for you to do that it provides for you, but then also gives you a lot of freedom. My favorite things that it provided for us was a tour of I'm not going to say it right.
No one's going to correct you here.
It's the art in Vienna. And that was great. We got a private tour of the whole building, and it was beautiful. Oh my gosh.
In the art museum, just the students?
Yes. So, there's other people, but we had a private tour guide and stuff specifically just for our group and to answer any questions that we had. And especially because we were taking an art history class at the time, it was really interesting because our teacher was like, look out for this and let me know what you think of this. So that was one of my favorite things that AIFS did for us, because museums aren't always something that I'll seek out when I'm visiting a city, just because depending on if there's a cost to it, there's lots of things that can have student discounts, which is good, but not everywhere has that. So that was a unique experience that was provided by AIFS, which was great. And then aside from that, I think my favorite memory itself was being there was a statue of Sigmund Freud, who Vienna. There's a large park in that area, and at one point it was almost every girl in the program. There's half of the class. We all just gathered in this huge circle on the lawn, and we had little picnic. It was just so much fun. It was very wholesome, really making connections with people that I didn't usually spend as much time with. So that was one of my favorite parts of the Vienna trip.
Especially with a program like Salzburg, where there are multiple options for housing, you don't always get to see everybody if you don't have a class with them, or if you're not on the same schedule. Maybe they have classes in the morning, you have classes more in the afternoon. You might not see all these people all the time. So when you go on these excursions, it's all of your AIFS family all in one place, and it's kind of nice to interact with people that you don't get to see on the regular. Did you make any friends outside of the AIFS bubble, whether they were other American students studying abroad, or locals, or international students, anything of that nature?
Some. I would say my international student dorm wasn't quite as involved as the other ones. There was one where a few people in our program got very close with other students, and I met them and became friends with them. We would go out and stuff together, but I'm not really still in contact with them, but it felt great to just meet them and talk about where they're from. And everyone always wants to ask me about life in the US. Salzburg is relatively smaller compared to Munich or Berlin or Vienna. Everyone always wants to ask why I chose to come here. So that was always a great conversation starter.
Weekend trips that you did outside of AIFS, where were some places that were easily accessible to you?
Personally, I was lucky enough to be able to go on a weekend trip almost every weekend. I think every weekend but 2 or so. So I went to 6 countries and I think 18 cities. And, I went to 2 islands off the coast of Greece while I was in Athens. Like I mentioned, I went hiking through the Alps. I went skiing. I truly just did a little bit of everything. It was Amazing. I went to Germany multiple times. I went to Oktoberfest with my family. I went to Croatia, Greece, Italy a few times. I went to Rome, Trieste, a few small like Mediterranean towns. While my friend Liz and I were in Rome, we just took a train out to the coast, and it actually was like a monsoon that day, but it was still fun. And I went to Budapest, and I just explored a lot over Austria in general. I went to a bunch of small towns, kind of more in the countryside as well.
You can fit in a lot of travel inside of, 12 weekends, right?
One of my favorites was Rome. I was a little nervous about going there because of how big it is and how touristy and everything, but I think we're pretty intentional about getting like off the beaten path and really exploring. We took an overnight train from Salzburg because, of course, Rome is pretty far south or south central-ish, but it's still very accessible from Salzburg. And then within Austria, I would just really recommend going to the lake region. It's very close. You can just take a day trip pretty much any day, and the bus fare is like €10 or so, depending on where you're going. I went to Hallstatt at one point, and it's this like beautiful little fairy tale town of a population of like 1,000 people, and it's only accessible basically by train or ferry. So I would definitely recommend that.
Do you still keep in touch with all of the friends that you made? Do you have plans to see each other again? I always say study abroad is an experience that bonds you for a lifetime.
Yes. So I have a group chat with the 3 girls within my dorm building I was really close with, and we talk pretty frequently. I mean, you're forever bonded by that experience, but we also just had similar interests. And then we have a larger group chat where we have like Zoom reunion calls every once in a while of a group of like 15 or so of us. Definitely stay in touch.
It's definitely a family for a lifetime. Culture shock. So pre-arrival, you had been to Europe before because you have family in Germany, correct?
Yeah, so my family had come to the US before, so that's when I met them. I had never been outside the country before going.
So culture shock this could have been real. What was that moment? Did you have a moment where you were like, okay, yeah, no, I'm definitely not in America anymore?
I would say I had it once, and briefly, and then it was done, and then I didn't really experience it anytime after that. I definitely experienced reverse culture shock a lot more.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what was that like when you returned back? Because you were the following semester right back at your university. So what was that like to repatriate? What were your coping mechanisms?
Reverse culture shock was never something I really considered until the intro session on one of the first days in Salzburg, that the resident director started talking about it, and she was like, this is something you will experience to some extent, and I had never even heard of it. You know, we all know the jokes about when you come back from being abroad and all your friends are like, oh wow, did you study abroad? So you don't want to like talk about it all the time, you don't want to be bragging. It can feel pretty lonely to readjust, and because all these memories are so fresh in your mind, like all you want to do is just keep living it, and so that can kind of exacerbate the sadness of it being over. I definitely struggled with that in the beginning, and also being abroad is so liberating and carefree. You know, the classes are just so interesting. It doesn't really feel like work, and the whole time you're just making all these great memories with people. When you come back and have to like go back to work and go back to school, it's that can also kind of add on to that feeling of sadness of it being over and reverse culture shock. Another way I experienced it was even just in little things like grocery shopping. Like I was so used to doing it on my own and in a certain way. I had my routine in Salzburg, and that was disrupted. The public transportation, like those kinds of things, you come to really miss them. And so when I got back, I was like, wow, well in Austria they do it this way, and like I like that better.
You're trying to like curb saying that all the time, but it's like in you and you can't. It's almost like word vomit. Sorry guys, it's still. I know you said, you know, when you were abroad, like cooking was your catharsis. You liked to journal. Did you have those cathartic habits or hobbies that were a release once you did return?
Being abroad definitely helped with that. It kind of established things that I do really enjoy to do in my own times. Well, journaling was a huge way that I coped with that reverse culture shock. Just kind of like writing it all down, like writing specifically the parts that I missed and like my favorite memories. I started a scrapbook even of just like little mementos, like maps or concert tickets or things like that, and pictures. That became a very healthy way to process everything that had just happened, because it kind of ends so suddenly. So everyone will tell you it goes by so quickly, so you're not prepared for it to end. So that was a great way that I was able to kind of process it on my own, because it can be somewhat invalidating to try to talk to people who don't understand it. Yeah. It's great to share with people, of course, but it can be somewhat invalidating because they don't understand what you did.
Maybe it's like a misconception, but people that don't study abroad kind of always have this idea that, oh, you just went on like a vacation and oh, your classes were like easy, right? And that's not the case. Like, this was your home for 3 months. You acclimated to another lifestyle, another culture, another public transportation system, which sounds like it was pretty manageable in Salzburg, but it's not always easy. There was a process to get acclimated in the place you live, just as there's that reverse process. So it is not just a vacation, guys. It is fun. There's travel. There's all those really great things, but it's hard work too. And then to come back, you kind of have another process that you have to enter into, which is repatriation. So yeah. So what is that advice that you give to students at your home university, or students that we connect you with that are interested in studying in Salzburg, that you give to them to kind of encourage them to pursue this and follow through?
I think my biggest piece of advice that I've given anytime I've been talking to people about it, like just thinking about it, especially if they're unsure of where to go or unsure if they can do it, my biggest advice is literally just do it anyway. Like, no matter what's holding you back, if it's money or fear or, homesickness, a lack of confidence, a lot of those things I had to do going into it, and you kind of just have to push yourself to do it, because I truly believe that like you would just always wonder what you missed out on and what you like, all the good that could have come from it, because I know how many amazing ways it's changed my life if I hadn't done it. Like,
who would you be, Lauren? I would say for students that are on the fence too, like if you're like a methodical person and it's like logic and fear and all these things that are kind of stacking on you, make a list of what all those reservations are, and then make a list of like how you can engage each of these and solve and find resolve for each of them. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but please take us 7 leagues under the sea, or whatever that saying is. All the ways in which you've changed professionally, personally, academically, whatever you want to share. We know that this is just, it's a vessel for growth, study abroad, right? Tell us how you've changed, all the ways, all the feels. Just take us there.
So I would say that I grew immensely in who I am while I was abroad. I truly became so more confident. It kind of scares me like how much changed in like 3 months. I was just so much more sure of myself and so much less concerned with what other people thought of me, or whether or not I was capable of doing something on my own, or I was convinced I was going to get lost and not be able to find my way back or not be able to figure something out. And I always did. That gave me a ton of confidence coming back in kind of in every regard, whether like in my friendships, in school, work. Like imposter syndrome, I think, was not as big of an issue for me anymore, because I had a lot more self-confidence. Another way is definitely that I had learned to, I used to be someone who was so type A to a fault that I had to plan everything out. I was very methodical, and I'm still that way to an extent. I am who I am, but I'm way more relaxed and willing to just go with the flow and roll with the punches now, because I just learned that like even when things don't go wrong, and it's not an if but it's a when, it'll still be beautiful, and you're still going to like create these amazing memories that you'll laugh about even during it and later on. That mindset was a very big shift in my life, and I think especially considering the fact that 4 months later I came back and it was the start of a global pandemic, I was very much more equipped to just roll with the punches and kind of find the silver linings in everything because of being abroad, because I had that mindset of like, it's okay, it'll be a funny story one day. Just be present and be thankful for the moment that you're in now, because it's not like it became, when something would go wrong, it was like not worth it almost to get upset about. And that's not to say frustrations aren't valid, but it was like, I'm only here for 2 more months, so I'm going to make the most of this.
In terms of everything that you're studying, do you think this plays a role in your future goal? How do you think that's going to stack up for you in the future, and how will this play a role in that?
Prior to going abroad, I'd had a lot of volunteer experiences in the nonprofit sector, and I've been mostly focused on public policy as my future career path. But going abroad really shifted my whole perspective. I kind of was able to get outside of my like comfortable bubble and see and witness people's lived experiences. So my whole perspective shifted until a global perspective. I now not only want to do public policy, I want to do international policy. And I'm actually planning on going to grad school in Germany. So it's really shifted a lot of that and my interest in everything.
So I'm going to take you through our speed round. I'm just going to give you a word, and in relation to your experience, just the first thing that pops into your mind. So food.
The first word probably is schnitzel. It was so good. It was one of my favorite foods while I was there. It's basically like pork, just pounded really thin and heavily breaded. And it would usually be served with these like delicious potatoes or something else. I always got it with the potatoes. But
when you were cooking abroad, because I know you mentioned in your housing that you cooked often for yourself, were you more traditional to like American dishes that you knew how to make, or did you expand your horizons and try to make things like schnitzel?
Both. I didn't attempt schnitzel while I was there. I have since when I was home. I tried to make I would cook like different types of sausage, 𝗟𝗧𝗦𝗧. That's like meats and cheeses are very big aspects of the diet there. So I would kind of always try like different types of Swiss and Austrian cheeses. Pastries are amazing. They were some of my favorite parts. Especially I would a lot of times go early to class and go and get that and like an espresso before going up to class. Definitely tried a whole bunch of different ones. There's lots of different kinds that I'd never had here. In America, I'd always had just like croissants, like plain croissants, but they had a bunch of different ones with different fillings in it and all sorts of things that I don't even honestly know what they were most of the time, but they were so good.
Next word, transportation. We talked about this.
Convenient. It is so accessible throughout the whole city. It's very clean. It's very like reliable.
Locals.
Fun.
Language.
Intimidating, but rewarding.
We talked about this too, but favorite city, whether that's Salzburg, whether it's not in Austria, whether it is one of your weekend travels, you had so many.
Salzburg.
Yeah. I love that. I love when people pick their own, because it's your home, right? Landmarks.
𝗟𝗘𝗧𝗦𝗧.
Architecture.
Beautiful and old.
And then one word to describe your entire experience.
So the first word that came to my mind was magical.
Excellent. Well, Lauren, thank you for being with us. Such a joy. Any closing remarks?
No matter what's holding you back, just do it. And if you can, go to Salzburg. I hold it very dearly to my heart, and I hope that everyone can see it in the future.
How do you say goodbye in German or Austrian?
You can say Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss is kind of like a casual, like, bye.
Well, Lauren, auf Wiedersehen. We'll see you soon.
Bye.